Hey guys, thanks for supporting the generic tech support channel. This is Tech Guy 1. Just wanted to thank you guys all for making this channel great. Like and subscribe if you guys haven't already. Let's get this video rolling. Hey guys, what's going on today? So, I released a video this past weekend where we went over, we had a discussion here about our Granite Edition of XP and specifically the issues that we had with our firewall, or rather our configuration, our LAN server configuration. And what we were seeing was that we were getting a null authentication value, and we went through the testing to show the null authentication value for the named pipe access through browser, the IPC $ connection with a user account with no authentication. And the most typical way you could fix this in this configuration is actually to create a perimeter setting here to require security signature and restrict null access and set the value of 1. Now, in Windows 10, you could use the value of 2, which disables. In value 1, what it does is it just restricts it to only the administrator account, and in 0, you could use the user account. However, in the configuration for Windows XP, because we are talking about SMB1, this, while it does work, will not allow us to still restrict those shares, that IPC $. Now, we could disable the shares through our configuration. And to do that, what we'd do is we'd go into computer management, we'd go into system tools, shared folders, and you would have shares in here. And the shares would be the configuration for the actual shares. But since this is a client machine, we're not going to use this as a file server. And the idea of this machine is to be used as a client machine with no file access. The easiest way to actually fix this issue is to disable the server service. And if we go into the services console here and specifically go to the service, we set this as disabled, the LAN server service itself, then what that'll do is it will stop all shares from this system. So we won't see anything internally. You won't be able to go to C $, D $, you won't be able to go to the system, the IPC share, the admin $. Those won't show up once you disable the actual share itself, which is start volume or start D-word number 4, which is set for disabled. So what I did at that point is I decided, you know, we're dealing with this, we have to do the configuration. Let's just add that to our actual registry configuration. Now, this registry configuration is all of our settings for our compliance scan. Basically, this is our full NIST 800-171 compliance settings for our Windows 10 desktop. Now, using this configuration, I extracted all of these registry settings for our Windows 10 system, but then had to modify them to work on Windows XP. Because keep in mind that Windows XP doesn't use the same ADML, ADMX configuration templates. And since adding the templates without the server to a Windows XP machine is not something I wanted to dig into, I had an Excel spreadsheet that I went through, and I did the comparison between Windows 10 and Windows XP as far as where our registry keys existed from one operating system to the next. Now, before we put those changes into place, as far as our LAN server configuration changes, we had 28 infos and 1 high. And if we drill into this, our 1 high was our SMB configuration, which we will see here for 445, the CIFs. And specifically, this is the SMB configuration for the following pipes of browser. Now, I went through all of the CVE reports. I went through the CVSS reports. I did the Googles to see if there was a way for us to allocate or implement these configuration changes, and that's where I found that we had problems with our connection. So basically, we couldn't use the value number 2 for disable a no pipe, but we could disable it for the user configuration with number 1. Went through the LSA configuration as well and set the values in the LSA configuration and added those as well to our script. And doing all of that, I still, after numerous scans, couldn't get our configuration to go back to remove this configuration, this unsupported. So what I did find, though, is that we have 2 things we're dealing with. We're dealing with the NetBIOS configuration and something called LLMR. Basically what LLMR is a value that allows you to use link local multicast name resolution. So in English, what that does is it's basically like a newer version of your NetBIOS name translation, but it uses multicast to do that. So that's not something that is considered secure. So as a result, through the STIGs or the CIS, they recommend you disable it. Now, the problem is in Windows XP, technically that doesn't exist, but because we slipstreamed all those updates for the point of sale system, it does exist in this particular system. And as a result, we have information in the actual scan here that indicates that that's running. So that adds to our infos. So 28 infos and 1 high is not satisfactory, at least for me. Now, it is better than what it is out of the box, right? So out of the box, it's 49 infos. There's, I think, 3 criticals and 2 highs. So it is better than out of the box, but it's still not what I would call secure. So what at that point I figured out was, well, we have to disable the NetBIOS configuration. Now, unfortunately, there's no way for me to script this. I would love to script it, but it requires group policy. And the reason why is because of what it is and how it's applied. So if we go into the network adapter itself, and go to properties, and we go to properties for the TCP/IP, and then advanced, and then we're going to go to wins. You're going to have to go under here and go to NetBIOS settings and disable the NetBIOS over TCP/IP. There's no way around that. Unfortunately, in the registry, there's a customized GUID, and it's per machine. It's not the same on every machine. It's different on every machine. It's different on every install, and then it's different for every network adapter type. So there's no way for me to script that. I mean, I could create probably a batch script that would attempt to do it, but technically speaking, it requires PowerShell in the later versions to actually disable it. And the easiest way for me to do that is just to tell you, at least in this configuration, choose disable the NetBIOS over TCP/IP and hit OK, and then hit OK, and then hit close. And that'll set your network adapter to not use NetBIOS. Now, during the days of Windows XP, NetBIOS was required. But during the days of Windows 10 and 11, NetBIOS is not required. It's leftover stuff that existed in the operating systems from the days, honestly, of like NT3.5, NT4, and Windows 2000. While it did exist in XP, XP was really the transition between needing NetBIOS and not needing NetBIOS. So anything past Windows XP, it's not really necessary to have, especially with modern DNS. So that can be disabled. And once that's disabled, the next step was to run the actual script again, so that way we could add our LANman server value number 4, which disables the actual service. And once we disabled the service and rebooted the system, we got this, which is 11 infos. No high, no medium, no critical. Now, on the 11 infos, based off of the details and the information that exists in here, I think the next step is probably to go through these actual issues here that we have and figure out which ones of these we could correct and which one of these we should just call a false positive. Because ultimately, at this point, this operating system, with all the updates that have been applied through the actual scripting, which still have to fix a couple of them to apply so that way the system will reboot, with all the updates applied through the scripting, and then the configuration that we have through our registry modification, and then whatever is left in here, I would say we're nearing the end of our security configuration for our Granite XP system, at which point then all of this information will be available on our Git repository. So let's go over the 11 things we have left. So the first one is called Common Platform Enumeration. So basically, it's just telling me that the CPE found that this system is either Windows 2000 or Windows XP. So I would call this particular info something that we should just whitelist as not being an issue. Now, if anybody out there has something different to say or doesn't think that these things should be whitelisted, please add a comment and let me know specifically which one of these infos you don't think should be whitelisted. We could dig further into that. Okay, so the next one down is going to be our Ethernet card manufacturer's detection. So basically, this is the MAC address that's seen from our VM system. Again, I don't think this should be a cause for alarm. Every system's going to have a MAC address. Anything that has a network adapter will have a MAC address. That's just part of life, part of the configuration, and part of the way this works. So I would say at this point, this particular thing would be a false positive. And if we look here to the right, we could actually see risk factor is none. So this is literally just an informational. So let's whitelist this one as well. So one that we do have to fix here is our ICMP timestamped request remote date disclosure. And the reason why is this configuration shows this is because we don't have the TZ patch in place. That's going to be our time zone patch. So that was an optional update at some point on the Windows XP environment. It could also be used, you could use third-party software to actually fix that. So we might have to figure out what we could do to fix our actual configuration for our time zone on our Windows XP machine. However, with that said, also really not that big of a deal, at least from an ICMP timestamp. Because again, if we look, Windows running Vista 7 2008 R2 are deliberately incorrect. So I mean, in reality, this is probably still a false positive, but it is something that we should look into, which is the time clock. So I'm going to add that to our list. So this is another one we'll have to look into. I have no idea why the NTP server is running on this desktop. So the NTP server is running, not the NTP client, which that should not be the case on our Windows XP system. So we'll have to take a look, see specifically what's going on here. We have a reference number down here, so we may have to dig into this reference number to figure out specifically what's going on the system to show that we're listening on port 123 for an NTP server. Again, if it was a client, then I wouldn't think anything of it. But the fact that the server port is listening is a concern. So we do have to look into that one. Then one of the last ones in here is going to be our trace route information, which basically is the trace between our Tenable Nessus scanner and the actual IP address of the system. And obviously without a firewall, it's going to be real easy for this thing to do a trace. I've blocked my route configuration. Unfortunately, I don't want to show that. That's basically the information of each hop to get to the actual system with IP address and MAC address disclosure. And again, not showing that on here, no offense. We can see that we're on UDP port 0 for the connection because again, it's trace route. There's nothing really we could do about that. We'll call that also a false positive. So that really just leaves us with what we got, right? So we have to figure out our NTP protocol configuration. We still have to figure out some of our update configuration. And then once we do that, we're good to roll this package out. So I think the next steps on this particular project are probably to fix our time because I have a feeling that would be the easier of the two. And we'll have to go through the configuration again on our actual, we'll have to go through the configuration again on our actual updates to figure out specifically what updates we're missing in the process. And I may make a video on that because I'm going to have to roll out a brand new vanilla Windows XP system. So that way we could apply our registry modifications to it and we could apply our configuration changes to it. So that way we could basically block out our, our LLMNR, or our link local multicast name resolution. It's a tongue twister, sorry about that. And then NetBIOS, we'll have to get that also configured with that in the video. And we'll have to set our username and password correctly so that we have authentication process. And we'll go through a full video on the Granite XP once we get these couple last tidbits of problems resolved. Okay, so I know you guys are probably thinking, should have ended the video there, but I figure since we only have 2 fixes really to go through, and then we can run another scan, it's probably worth just fixing those 2 issues here. So, what I have for you here is we are looking at the time zone information in the registry, and that's specifically HQ local machine system current control set control time zone information, and this is the time zone information. And we'll see we're set for Eastern time zone, Eastern daylight time. Now what I did is I actually imported the time zone configuration from a Windows 11 machine into the system and rebooted it, and I'm using that configuration now for Eastern time zone. Now this won't matter from one system to another, more than likely. The TZ edit patch was only really Windows 2000, Windows ME, maybe Windows 98 SE, but it really didn't take effect or didn't really include Windows XP. However, on this particular Windows XP, because it's kind of a montage of our point-of-sale systems, our embedded systems, and our XP Professional Service Pack 3 system, for whatever reason, after I applied all those updates for the point-of-sale system, it kind of broke the clock and the communication or configuration of the clock to the VMware system. Now, that doesn't mean that it's going to have that issue on hardware. I'm not sure for certain. So as a failsafe or as an easy way to correct that, what I've done is I've included the TZ patch for Windows 11 in the Windows XP system, and that's added to our script for our registry configuration. So that should resolve our issue now with our Tenable scan. So let's run another scan on this system and see what we come back with. You know, before we run our actual scan, maybe what we should do is we should take a look at our NTP UDP broadcast. Because in our scan, we were seeing port 123 as the NTP server. And here we are seeing it again. So we are, for whatever reason, broadcasting time services off of this system for PID 1092. Now, because it's Windows XP, we don't see PID as a default configuration setting. So you'll have to go to View and then choose Select Columns and choose PID and hit OK. And we could actually arrange and we could take a look to see what we have. So we have a service host as 1092. So if we run our command task list space / SVC, that'll expand our task manager detail as far as what the heck our SVC is. So you'll see SVC host on the left. And then on the right hand side, you'll see specifically what that is. So we have service host here on the left, and then on the right, we're going to see what that is. And basically what we're doing here is, if you haven't seen the other videos, is this is your PID. This is the name of the actual image, or the image name. We'll see it here, image name. And you see the PID. That's the PID, image name. Then on the right here, you're going to see username, which is system, which you're not going to see up here. And you'll see the CPU usage and memory usage. But up here is what you'll see is the actual service name. So if you go to the services console and you look for these specific names, that's what's running underneath the service host. So that's how you troubleshoot that. And if we scroll back up, if we do a netstat, we find the listening. We could see the listening, and then we would find the PID. Or we could do the netstat. We could find the actual port, which we see right here, and then we see the PID. So it doesn't matter if it's UDP or TCP, it won't make any difference, because if you define specifically what you're looking for, you'll find it, right? So down here, we took the 123. We know that we need 1092 as our PID. So if we come into our task manager here, we could find 1092 as the PID. We know that it's a service host. So then if we do the task list / SVC, we could find the service host, we could find the PID, and then we could find all the information, the services that are running under that service host. And then at that point, what we have to do is we got to go to the service console, and we could figure out what service we would need to stop. So what you're going to want to do is, if it's a time service issue in Windows XP, is it's W32 / TZ. There's a space there. So it's W32 TM space / TZ. And what that'll do is it'll pull back the time zone information for the actual system. Don't use net time commands in Windows XP. It's not a good idea. So W32TM is the command you want to use, and it'll show you specifically what your time zone configuration or time settings are on your actual system. Now, if you need more information, you can get rid of the TZ, and it'll bring back a whole slew of information as to what you could use as far as your configuration is for your actual system. Now, keep this in mind, is that on this particular system, we saw that port 123 is UDP broadcasting, and according to our scan, it says that it's a server. However, according to configuration on the actual system, it is not a server. So it's probably just a false positive, or it's information being broadcasted back as far as the time zone configuration on XP. Because the time zone configuration changed, I think it was in Windows 10, where it was slightly different. It's changed so many different times. So I mean, like, NT4 changed from 2000, 2000 again changed from XP, XP changed again, and then Vista 7, 8, and 8.1 are pretty much the same. 10 and 11 are different again. It's still the same command logic to get to it and use it, but it's not the same anymore as far as how it functions. So from a functional standpoint, I think we're actually okay. We may have to add a firewall rule to stop the port 123 outbound UDP port from actually communicating through the Windows firewall. But with that said, the way it's configured right now, I don't see an actual issue with it as far as the configuration on the XP system is concerned. So something else we can use to check the time in all versions of Windows and versions of Windows Server. And I say Windows Server because there's a bug in 2016 and 19 Server for the time zone. So if you run into that issue, it's real simple. It's just timedate.cpl and hit OK. And you'll get the time zone information in here. So we're automatically syncing right now with an internet time zone, which is time.windows.com. And quite frankly, I don't know that that exists anymore. So I would just use the time.nist.gov because that does exist. So we could see that the next time synchronization is at 4:08 p.m. And quite frankly, that's likely what we're getting, is we're getting a broadcast UDP port saying, hey, are you there and what time it is it? And then we're getting the reply back on our TCP connection to actual time services. So I would just leave that alone and call that fixed. Let's run our scan now and see what we come back with. Okay, guys, so our scan just finished. We're going to jump into there. That's 4/22/24. That's today. You can see it down here at the bottom. That's our scan results. We have 1, which is still that NTP server protocol. And again, I think that's a false positive for that particular system because it is XP. So likely we could just ignore that, and I think that's what we're going to do because it doesn't pose any issues. Broadcasting UDP time, really, I mean, what's somebody going to do? They're going to know what time it is? It's really not, it's not a critical issue. It's outbound and it's time. So with that said, that leaves us with 1. We have one info from our scan from our Granite XP system. So I think at this point what we're going to do is we're going to end this video, and the next video we're going to go through is the installation of the full package. I still have to figure out the update situation with the couple of updates and split those packages up, which is something that I'll likely do on this system, but probably won't video it just because I'm sure you guys don't want to sit there and watch every update that requires a reboot. And I still have to corrugate that actual information with the number on the XP update itself. So I'm going to go through that process, get those update details configured and added, documented. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another video and we're going to go through the Granite XP installation process from start to finish. All right, guys, thanks for watching. I'll catch you guys later.